Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. Be inspired by the voices of visionaries, changemakers, and ordinary, extraordinary people who do what they do all for the love of learning.
This is For the Love of Learning, Voices of the Alternative Education Movement. I'm Lainie Liberti, and this is episode number 66. In tonight's episode, we take a look at happiness without higher education. What do David Karp, founder of Tumblr, David Neeleman, founder of JetBlue Airlines, Mark Zuckerberg, billionaire co-founder of Facebook, and Michael Dell, billionaire founder of Dell Computers, and tonight's panelists all have in common? They're all living happy, extremely fulfilling lives without the need of higher education. All of these amazing people prove that all you really need to succeed in today's world is passion and perseverance, as formal education is becoming more and more, for many people, an unnecessary expense and possibly the biggest waste of time. Of course, there are some occupations that will always require a degree, a doctor, a lawyer, and an engineer. And some trades will always require specific classes or certification. But in today's world, with so much information available online and in public libraries, as well as available internships, apprenticeships, etc., a 4-year degree seems to be just an unneeded expense and a delay to beginning one's independent life and career. Tonight's panelists feel the same way. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to each of our panelists, and we'll start the conversation. Although these introductions are brief, we have more information about each of our panelists on the show notes page located at consciousconsumernetwork.tv, and look for the show notes page for episode number 66. There you will find more extensive information about each of our panelists' backgrounds and links to their projects and websites. So first, I'd like to introduce you to Kevin. Kevin is an unschooling father of 4 with a successful career in high tech, despite having no academic credentials to speak of. Kevin left high school at the age of 17, frustrated and bored with public education and anxious to break free from the monotony. He entered the workforce immediately, trying his hand at many things from loading flatbed trucks for UPS to fabricating suits and shelters for the US military and chemical warfare. Eventually, Kevin realized his passion was for computer science, which he had nurtured as a hobbyist since grade school. and could be an opportunity for a fulfilling career and a great way to support his family. So armed with nothing but basic computer skills, he started pursuing his goal, starting in a low-paying call center and working his way up into more technical roles. He is now the engineer and lead of a global IT team responsible for infrastructure in 30 offices in 22 different countries. The company he works for is an e-commerce powerhouse, and he gets to be at the center of technology, of all the technology that makes it possible. He also balances this career with unschooling life, including kids, animals, and frequent family travel and other pursuits like music and playing hockey. So welcome to tonight's panel, Kevin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Martin, Kevin's son. And Martin is an unschooled kid who is all about creative expression through music. He's been following his passions for years: cosplay, art, martial arts, gymnastics, but most of all, music. He has taught himself to play multiple instruments and is working on mastering multiple musical style genres, although his favorite is rock alternative. As someone who is at the traditional age to start thinking about college, Martin is weighing his options and feels that pursuing the traditional path of a four-year college degree doesn't make sense. So welcome to tonight's panel, Martin.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Next, I'd like to introduce you to parents, Brendan and Jennifer. Brandon and Jennifer have been traveling the world with their three daughters since 2009 and have visited and lived over 32 different countries. Their travels are funded by Brandon's business, musicteachershelper.com, which brings in almost $1 million per year and employs over 20 people who all work from home. Brandon has a bachelor's degree in computer science from Weber State University, and Jennifer has a bachelor's degree in interpersonal communication from the University of Utah. Neither of them have used their degrees professionally, as Brandon was fully employed as a programmer before he graduated due to having started the business by learning programming on his own. So welcome, Brandon and Jennifer.
Thanks, Lainie.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And finally, I'd like to introduce you to Philip. Philip was home educated as well. Now he is the owner and operator of the Learning House Studio and Productions located in metropolitan Washington, D.C. After completing high school, Philip was pressured by his mom to attend college. He made it through about a month or two just before completely losing all interest. He stopped showing up to college and put his energy instead into an internship at a local recording studio. Today, he is living his dream as an audio engineer, camera operator, and photographer. He has worked with people like Hillary Rodham Clinton, John Kerry, and Ron Paul, as well as artists like Carole King, Maroon 5, and John Legend. Philip speaks across the country about alternative and home education and unschooling. So welcome, Philip, to tonight's show.
Thank you for having me.
And you've got that engineer voice. I love it. So, Philip, why don't we start the conversation off with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to the position, the statement that you don't need college to be happy or to be successful?
It actually kind of took a long time for me because I feel like there was just a lot of pressure, like as I was finishing up high school, even being homeschooled, to go to college. And like just everything from just what you see on the TV to, you know, just what your parents, grandparents, friends, you know, even people you look up to, it just seemed at that point, mid 2000s when I was graduating that, you couldn't survive if you didn't go to college. Like people got freaked out. And so I was also freaked out about it, but it was like, I didn't know. I just couldn't sit there. I was kind of an antsy person. I just wanted to work. Is really what it came down to. And I loved, speakers and music and sound. And I just, it was like, this internship came up at the studio, and, everything that I've been taught said this didn't make sense. But, my heart, I feel like, just said, stay here. It's fine. It'll be okay. But it really, it was an inner battle for a long time to really, I don't know, get over that, because just everything, all that programming through all those years. So that's but eventually around 23, I really started, when I would have been graduating college, was when I was starting to see, all my friends falling in and out of school, and and just struggling, and then the money, and they never had money because they didn't work, or they were working and giving it all to a school. And I've really seen everyone I grew up, just, not everybody, but a lot of them not use their degrees, which I think is sad, because learning's amazing and education's amazing, but to not use, something you're spending all this money for seems, really just, a shame. So.
Yeah, you said you had this inner battle, and this is from somebody who was not indoctrinated into the school system. You were home educated. Was the inner battle something that you learned from your parents, or was it something that you learned from society around you and never questioned? What did that inner battle consist of, or the voice of, you need to go to college? Where did that come from?
I think it's everywhere, it's just, like I said, watching TV and just commercials, and you still see them. I don't really watch TV anymore, but when I do, there's so many commercials for college, and that's and I don't want to come across as someone that hates education. That would be, ignorant, but it's that's the thing, is it's a commercial, and the commercial's selling you to do this. And so I think there's a lot of it just in our society. My parents, they both went to college, so they were kind of even though they homeschooled us, they were like, well, it's probably, this is the next step. But I give them credit, especially, my dad, a lot of credit, because he was kind of like, hey, you got to do something. So if you're not going to do college, just do something. And, looking back on that, that was pretty cool. So, I'll give him some credit for keeping me sane in that. But just family, friends, all the adults and parents of my friends were very like, oh, you're going to go to college, our son or our daughter that you're friends with. And when I was like, no, well, I've already started my first company. I'm working on that. And, I was already kind of doing things that were interesting to me. So, that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. And what I love about this beautiful panel tonight is we've got somebody, a fairly young person, you, Philip, who went through home education and is now in the beginning of your career, more or less. I mean, more or less. You're in your 20s, are you not? Yeah?
I just turned 30.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Oh, thanks.
A fairly young person. And then we've got a set of parents, and we're going to jump to them next. And then we've got a younger, a soon-to-be 14-year-old with his father. And all of them have the same perspective, but all in different places in their life are coming at it from a different perspective. And I'm really, really looking forward to tonight's show, because I think we're going to be able to get to this topic from so many different perspectives. So without further ado, let's jump over to Brandon and Jennifer. So Jennifer, both of you are parents that travel, and I've known you for many years, but you both, as I shared in your bio, have higher education degrees. So you've taken that route and changed your perspective. Is that based on your experience with university, or your experience with college, or your experience with traveling, or your experience being a parent? Why don't you talk a little bit about, how you came to this opinion in your life now?
When I was growing up, I had two ideas of what I wanted to do for a living. One was to become a computer programmer, which I actually started when I was 12. I really delved into it. And the other was to be a music teacher like my dad, which I started. I actually started teaching piano when I was 16. But I eventually decided to go to college for a programming degree, because I thought that's what was needed in order to get get a programming job. But what I found out was that through my entire 4 years at the university, there were only a handful of classes that were even remotely relevant to what I wanted to study. And I felt like my time there was largely wasted. And most of what I was learning was not, even in the programming classes, it was theory, or it was vague, or it wasn't something I could use today to enhance my skills. And I already knew a bit about programming because I'd been doing it for a while. So I didn't find it very necessary. It was good for meeting friends and for some of the connections that I had there, and there were a couple of classes where I learned a few new things, and some of them were interesting. But as far as enhancing my career, I think it would have been a much better use of my time for me to just continue working on my own programming projects and develop my skill that way.
And I felt the same about my degree. Interestingly enough, I actually had a hard time knowing what I wanted to get a degree in. So for about a full semester, I just took classes in things that, I might be interested in, because I didn't know what I wanted to get my degree in. And eventually I settled in on interpersonal communication, although there were many things I would have been interested in pursuing. But I was very surprised that really only 2 or 3 classes that I took in college at the university level for my bachelor degree in interpersonal communication actually were directly relevant to that degree. So I felt like, Brandon, like I wasted my time. Like I could have studied so much more in depth in a different way to learn what I actually was interested in learning about. And just because my degree says interpersonal communication, bachelor degree, that doesn't mean that I would be an asset to any business looking for somebody who knows something about interpersonal communication, because I only had 3 classes in it. And so it just seemed like a joke to me. And it was expensive. But, it's interesting because it's still something I'm interested in, but I feel like I would be so much farther ahead now with that interest and with my knowledge in that area had I learned it a different way instead of spending so much time on general education requirements in the university, which also I think was too much information, too many classes, too quickly. I think maybe 2 or 3 classes a semester would be my max that I would want to do, because I don't like to go at that pace. And I think there is a lot to be said for taking things slower, and a lot of people are way too stressed out at college with the exams. And so for me, yeah, I'm really glad that I recognize that now. And we do tell our children the same thing, if there's something that you really need college for and you really want to pursue it, then by all means. But if not, if it's going to be like our experience, it's probably not really something you want to spend your time and money on.
It's interesting because I think that, we're coming out of a generation that believes the story. You have to go to college in order to be successful or happy. We're coming from that generation. And it's just the tipping point right now of those that are challenging that idea and really looking at it and dissecting it from the perspective of, well, what does it give you? Does it give you, career of your choice? Does it give you assurance that you're going to have employment? Does it give you happiness? No, we can see the big picture. It gives you debt. And if you're going to college for learning, if you're going to university just for the simple passion of something. Don't think when I was growing up, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, many people were questioning that. They weren't saying, well, I could be educated and not go to college and university. And I think we're shifting drastically now. So it's really wonderful to hear you guys as parents to be able to reflect back and say, Yeah, okay. Now my children may or may not have to make the same mistakes as I do. Do you feel that there's pressure, and this is to Brandon and Jennifer, still social pressure for you to, you know, even though you're giving your children alternative education in their undergraduate years, still prepare them for college? Do you still feel that pressure from society around you, or perhaps even from family?
It's a question we get regularly. Yeah, how are your kids going to go to college when they get to be that age? And I'm like, well, maybe they won't. But it's also become easier and easier for kids who have been educated alternatively to get to college. I think that a lot of colleges are looking for kids who are a little more outside the box in their thinking, and not just someone who's willing to go through a program.
Cool, thank you. So why don't we jump on over to our youngest panelist, Martin. And Martin, as I said in your bio, you are getting to that age where people are probably asking you, shouldn't you start thinking about college? How is it that you know what it is that you want for your life at 13 and 14? How is it that you can make that decision?
Well, I don't really think I know what I want in life yet, but I've always known that I do not want to go to college because there's nothing I've ever wanted to pursue that needs that. But yeah, I get that question a lot, especially considering I'm homeschooled and stuff. So a lot of people, especially relatives, are like, well, when are you going to go to school? Like, you need to go to school. And I don't really want to.
But what I love is that you know what you do want and know what you don't want. And a lot of kids that are going through the traditional system don't have the confidence to say what they don't want. And that's pretty cool. And obviously I set you up with that question, and most people that watch know that I'm the mom of an unschooled teen, and I'll share a little bit about him too a little bit later, but he doesn't want to go to college, and I completely support that too. So good for you, and thank you for being on the panel and sharing your perspective. Why don't we get some perspective from your dad? What I love about your story, Kevin, is you show self-directed learner initiative, even though you went through school, but you took it from your career perspective and made it happen and made it work. And I think that's really, really cool. And how is that, having that background and experience, and then being a father to four unschoolers or alternative educated kids, and let them choose their own path? Why don't you share with us your story?
Yeah, so I'll just echo what Martin said. I get that question all the time, especially from coworkers. Working in a technology company, there's a lot of people that are college educated, and a lot of people who have families, and they have kids and they're saving for college and doing all of this. And when they find out that we keep our kids home and homeschool them or unschool them, that's usually the first question. The first question is that legal? Which I can't believe people still ask in this day and age. And then the second question is usually, what are you going to do about college? And I think my answer surprises them, because the truth is, we don't do anything specifically about college. We're trying to, hang on a second. Technical difficulties. We're trying to nurture their interests and follow that path wherever it might lead. And if it leads to something that needs a college education, or they feel compelled or drawn to that path, then that's fine. My wife is college educated. She graduated with honors, magna cum laude from Northeastern University, and I didn't make it past the 11th grade. So they have in their parents kind of both paths, and we're both happy people, so they could go either direction.
Well, Kevin, you just touched on the one thing that I want to go into next. And that's really the title of the show, and that's happiness without higher education. How would you and your family define a happy life?
Well, I think the key word is happiness. A lot of people define happiness as success, meaning financial or monetary. Will you be able to support yourself? Will you be able to support a family? And all of that stuff is important. I don't want to downplay it. But there's more to being happy than that. There's also being fulfilled. There's having something that you're passionate about and being able to spend time on it. There's more dimensions to it. And I think that's something that gets lost in the shuffle a lot, because we're so focused on just making sure that we can bring in money and pay the bills and do all of that stuff. And like I said, that's very important too, but there's more to consider. So I think, some people can be happy on very little in terms of income or material things, as long as they're doing something that they're happy doing. Some people, maybe they want to have the finer things in life, and they might want to look into a career path that's more profitable, and that's fine too.
So what tools, I just want to go a little bit deeper with you, Kevin, what tools do you need to cultivate in order to define what brings you happiness?
Well, I think, there's a lot to it. So obviously having passion and space and time to pursue things and figure things out. We have this wonderful resource that you mentioned in the intro called the internet. That really is leveling the playing field. I think when I think about college and just education institutions in general, they were the gatekeepers of knowledge for most of history. And in a very few years, technology has sort of smashed that wall down and made it so that anybody that has a decent internet connection get access to whatever knowledge they want. And I'm seeing that coming to fruition now. I mean, this guy spends any time during the day that he's not playing music, he's spending it researching the bands that he likes, following their histories. He is a walking music encyclopedia. He could probably walk into a bar and win a trivia contest if music was the theme. He's that knowledgeable. So, and that is because he has access to the internet and the passion and curiosity to pursue that knowledge. And that's really all you need.
Yeah, great answers. And I love just how this whole panel is all surrounding music somehow. And I think that just was a coincidence, but I think that's really, really cool. So Martin, what do you think is going to constitute making a happy life for you? So since we've heard from your dad, why don't you tell us what you think, qualifies as making a happy life?
I think making a happy life usually means doing what you love for something that makes someone else happy. Like, what I want to do is play music live as much as I possibly can, hopefully to gain exposure. But like, my other thing that I thought as a career path would be what he does, which is computer science and running that kind of thing, because that's what I wanted to do when I was very, very little, and that's kind of what I always thought would be my backup.
My career is his backup.
Yeah.
I think that with happiness, it's something that I think is accessible to everyone, regardless of their education status. It's really a state of mind. And I know in my life there have been so many times when I have just looked to the future for happiness, thinking, once I get this job, once I get this much money, once I get this kind of relationship, once I'm living in this place or doing this thing, then I'm going to finally be happy, right? But so often I would get there, and then immediately, I'm a very driven person, I would appreciate it for a few minutes and then jump to the next thing, without really stopping to be grateful and appreciate the circumstances that I'm in right now and what's good in my life right now. And while there are difficult moments and hard things that happen, I think in every moment of our lives, there's something we can look at and be grateful for and find some happiness in. And I think even in the most luxurious, amazing circumstances you can imagine, which I feel like we've been in for many moments of our lives, there are times in those circumstances where you can look around and be a miserable grump and find something to complain about. So I think happiness is very much an internal state of mind, and it's something that we choose in each moment. And it's also a habit that we can cultivate through practices like gratitude or mindfulness or generosity, things that help us connect to each other as human beings and to feel what it is to be human and alive, and appreciate that, do the things we love, everything everyone's been saying.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I wanted to add, I grew up thinking that the way to happiness was just to trust that whatever I'm being conditioned to do, like this path I'm being conditioned to follow, first do this, then do that, right? Just check off all the boxes. That's going to make me happy if I trust in what society and my culture is telling me is going to make me happy. Like go to school, get married, have kids, go to college, whatever. And just follow that path, right? But as I got older, I realized my path to happiness is my path, and it has to be one that I discover within myself, and I need to look for it, and I need to say I matter, and what I think matters, instead of going through these motions and kind of getting these intuitive hits that this doesn't make sense, this isn't really working, I don't see how this is going to lead to happiness, but ignoring it, instead. And so I think for me, that's a big one. And that's what I've been trying to do, is to learn how to tune into myself after so many years of kind of ignoring that voice. And so, yeah, that's been huge for me.
Yeah, I think those are definitely wise words from Brandon. It's weird. Happiness is like a mindset. I've struggled with that too, where I'm very goal oriented. And so there's always this next thing. So before I even, I get one goal and I'm already on to the next one. And it can become this thing. And I think when you do, you don't let things hold you back, and you start to just, I can do anything. Especially, with the internet, when I got my first computer with, DSL, the first real internet that was like, this is really rocking. You can learn a lot. I can watch videos with no problem. And it was like, it just started going where I was just like, I can learn this and I can learn that and I can learn this. And I really feel like I wasn't enjoying life, but that's the thing that is almost outside of, education. But, when you let that distract you, it can get, education. It's just like another thing. It's just this, it can be an empty pursuit, because it's like this status thing more than the actual learning of the experience, I think.
Well, you know what, Philip, you touched on something really important. And there is, with the culture of going to university and college, there is a culture of busyness and achievement and goal, right? And measurement and testing and all of these, memorization, all of these other things that go with the culture of school. And so is indeed this some sort of distraction in some way? Because everything that Brandon and Jennifer and Kevin and Martin and you have spoken about deals with the kind of learning that's not taught in any school, whether it's undergrad or college, university. If it's that, mindfulness and gratitude and presence and all of those things are really those things that lead to happiness, does learning history and dates somehow enhance somebody's life, or is it just a way of distracting and keeping somebody busy or preoccupied?
Well, you say
I
like
guess it's
distraction.
a question to everybody. Anybody want to-
Sure. Well, like distraction seemed to, like you said, distraction, the couple classes I took and I was in for very shortly at college, just the distraction level was so crazy for me. And, you know, it seems like that is a lot of the energy there is just the social situation. I always connected with older people, you know, because I just already was kind of doing things because of being homeschooled. I was already pursuing dreams. So I connected with people that are 10 years older that were also following dreams and kind of, you know, so being in college, everyone that's exactly the same age seemed, I just didn't, there was this distraction because everyone was distracted by, you know, these things they've been programmed to think. And it was a very odd experience for me. Any other thoughts on that by anyone else?
Yeah. So there's a book by a guy called Robert Fulghum. It's called Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Have you guys heard of it? It's this great book. It's full of essays, and I read it some time ago. He boils down the most important life lessons into basically things that you learned on the playground or learned as a young child, and you know, from learning how to get along with one another through cooperative play on the playground, learning about bravery through observing, you know, a hot air balloon, just these different life lessons that you really learn and internalize as a young person that really sort of everything else is additive, it's added onto. And it's less about the rote experiences and you know, the sort of step by step go, you know, through this door, then you get to go to the next door, that kind of thing, of the education system, and more about just basic concepts of morality that even little kids understand. You know, be kind to one another, don't hurt one another, you know, be polite, you know, don't take something that belongs to somebody else. Those types of basic lessons that are really, you know, the critical things and the things that you come back to later in life.
You know, what you've asked, Lainie, I think is a really deep philosophical question. And I mean, it really points to the heart of why, you know, we're here on this planet at all and what we want to do with our lives. And I can't say that I know the answer to that, even for me personally, even less for everyone on the planet. But I do think that, you know, learning things like history or facts or, you know, anything that, if it's interesting to you and if it's something that you feel driven to study because you're interested in it, you're excited about it, and it fills you with some kind of inner sense of joy and wonder, then I think it's worth it. It's not a distraction in that case, because that's what makes you feel alive. There's a really a wonderful quote that I love from Howard Thurman. He says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I love that quote because it's, for me, that's what a lot of life is about, is coming alive and doing the things we love. And for some, maybe that does mean exploring what a university environment feels like, you know, maybe they thrive there, you know, and I could see that being a possibility. But yeah, I think it's a matter of tuning into what works for you and following your own heart, whatever path you decide to take.
And along with that, I was thinking earlier today about, you know, how there's these requirements at the university that we have these general education classes, even if they're not directly related to our interests. I personally think that, like what Brandon was saying, you find what interests you, and then everything is interconnected in some way. So if you go deep enough into what interests you, it will touch a whole bunch of other areas that originally maybe you weren't interested in, but because it came out of your interest, you are interested in it to a certain degree after delving into what you care about, you know, and it's connected to that. And once you see that connection, then it becomes interesting.
And I also find it like sometimes I'll just be really interested in the topic and I'll go deep on it and I'll study it and I'll like immerse myself in it. And then once I've reached a certain point, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I'm done with that now. And it just kind of shifts or morphs into a different direction. And then that's where I head. And I think it's beautiful to have the freedom and to give our kids the freedom to live that way as well.
Mhm.
So, to add on to what he said, I have a lot of friends in the public school system, and a lot of them will be like, well, like, homeschooling, that stinks, you don't have any friends, or like, are you allowed to leave the house? And I get that constantly. And also a lot of people are like, what's 10 times 10? And I'm just like, no, I guess it's window. Like, everyone, it's just like people think I'm dumb and I'm friendless because I'm homeschooled. So the first thing I ask people anytime they ask me that question is, what did you learn this year? And a lot of the times there'll be an awkward silence and then they'll change the subject because it doesn't stay there because, most of the time you're not really caring about what you're learning. And that I ask them how many people that are actually their friends are their friends.
Thank you so much for saying that, Martin. And what you said actually it just adds on to what Brandon was just saying. To me, the whole idea of, if you look at university and college as this expense that you have, that you're putting out once, right? Most people go to college and they get their degree and then they're done, and they don't have the luxury to spend as much time as if they're interested in learning in school, floating from subject to subject to subject and learning what they want to get a good education. They have to be succinct and focused. And you have to make that decision when you're young. My goodness. I'll just share with you what my college university experience was. I started college when I was 16. I finished high school early. And I was pretty lucky in the sense where I knew I was interested in art. So I wanted to study art, and I did. And I breezed through it. And then when I was done, I'm a 20-year-old with a degree now for art. It's supposed to prepare me for a life. Okay, so I can paint now. Pretty good. I mean, I could paint before. But what about, my career took different turns and twists and so forth. But art was my passion, and I was lucky enough to be able to pursue that at a young age and be focused. But what about those that started college and didn't know what they wanted to do? What about those that spent 4 years studying psychology and at the end of it decided that they weren't interested in psychology, and now they pay this big chunk of money to have this degree that they're not passionate about, or counting, or something along the lines? And what permission do you have as an autonomous being to change your mind? I mean, you got to pay for it. There's too much tied into finances, and somehow learning is no longer the goal. It's like the objective at the end of this goal. And so I love what Kevin did. He found his career and started from the bottom and worked his way up. To me, that's really, really cool. So you got the hands-on experiential knowledge to do it. What about those that, like what Brandon was saying, want to shift their focus and go from one thing to another to another? Where do you learn from, where do you get that information? You want to talk about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think it's interesting because I think it requires a shift. I mean, if you go through college and you get a degree thinking it's going to prepare you for something, and at the end of it you realize that's not what you want to do, well, then you're in the same boat as somebody who maybe didn't go to college at all, and now you're free to change careers again. You can do it at any time. I've been a piano teacher, and I've been a computer programmer. I worked in a call center for a while, earning $10 an hour. Now I'm a business owner. I own several businesses. I've done all sorts of different things, and I know people who have just jumped around from career to career, and it's kind of the way a lot of things work in a lot of people's lives today. And the thing that I love about it is that it's possible. This isn't the day and age anymore where you have to go through years and years of training and certification in order to do something that you're going to do for the rest of your life, whether you like it or not, because that's what your family's done for generations. And that's not the world we live in today. This is a world of freedom and flexibility and unlimited information. Anyone can learn just about anything if they're passionate enough and interested enough in it. And I think those skills can be applied in so many different ways to find a fulfilling career and to change it whenever you're ready.
And I think as a parent, one thing we can do for our children, or for any children, even if they're not our own children, is to really encourage them to be able to pursue their own interests, instead of just jumping through hoops and always feeling like they're doing for other people. Because that's important from a young age, to be able to pursue your interests, because it helps you know when you become older what you are interested in. And then, of course, you may change, but at least you kind of have a head start, instead of just, I'm just doing what everybody tells me to do because they've told me to do it and my interests don't matter. So I think it's important for us to really encourage our children and give them that time and space to pursue their own interests. Like, that's why I love unschooling so much, because it does provide that.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Jennifer and Brandon, so much. As you know, I'm a parent too, and I encourage my son 100% to pursue his interests. And when I hear from family or from others, what is Miro doing these days? I'm so excited to share that he's so passionate about mythology, and he knows everything there is to know about Greek mythology, and we're planning a trip to Greece so we can pursue that and walk in the footsteps of the gods and the demigods and the titans. And I am just overwhelmed that he is so passionate and excited. But the response I get back from those outside of the unschooling or alternative education community is, what will he do with that? How is that going to lead to money? And part of me doesn't even want to address that. I don't even want to respond to that. And I think that's the kind of thinking that is what's really difficult to respond to. It's very black or white. Do this, get an education, get a career, make money, the end. And, how do you respond as an unschooling parent? And actually, this, Brendan and Jennifer, and this goes to you, Kevin, and I know, Philip, you're not a parent yet, but, anybody who has an idea about how to respond in a way that is respectful, of course, and we want to share and educate, to that kind of thinking. The floor is yours, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so I mentioned earlier, I get the question a lot at work about, like, oh, you homeschool, you unschool, what's going to happen? What are you going to do with your kids? What do they study? Very similar to what you were talking about, Lainie, with Moreau. And the funny thing is, there was a training that I was in at work where we watched a TED Talk video by Dan Pink. You guys might have seen it or are familiar with it. And the TED Talk is called The Truth About What Motivates Us. And his point is, there's three things that motivate you: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Those are the three themes to unlocking human potential and human motivation. And this is something that, I saw this TED Talk on a YouTube video in a work training. So the corporate world is figuring this out, and the rest of the world, from an education perspective and thinking about, how our kids are growing up, hasn't got the message yet that you really have to have a sense of autonomy. You have to be able to be self-directed. You have to have mastery. You know, if there's something that you're passionate about, you need to be able to laser focus on it and just do nothing but that, and cut out all distractions and just focus on one thing. And then purpose is so important too. If there's something that you're passionate about, that you believe in, you know, you're on a mission and you want to just do whatever it is that you're passionate about. That is the key to being successful in anything. And that's what I try and focus on with the kids, and what I try and focus on for myself, because that's what brings happiness. That's what brings success. When you really think about it, it's really not checking boxes or jumping through hoops.
And I think if the question is about how to earn money, whether with or without a college degree, you know, I just see opportunities everywhere now. For, I mean, since I turned on my entrepreneurial mind, it's like, wow, that could be a money opportunity. Like, I just see them everywhere. And if I just, like you were saying, pick one and focus on it, I'm pretty confident that eventually it will lead to dollars if that's what I want to do. And if I'm dedicated enough to make that happen. That is what path I really followed when I created my business. I just created a little computer program to help manage my piano students, and had no intention of turning it into a business. But then when Jen's dad lost his job at an IT company, I kind of got a wake-up call that there's no such thing as job security when you work for somebody else. And so I decided that I wanted to provide more financial stability for my family than I could through a traditional job route, and decided to turn the business, or turn my little program into a business and start selling it online. And it grew very slowly and took years and years, but I worked very hard, and now it's, as you said, to the point of earning almost $1 million this year, hopefully, and employing over 20 people. So it's been a great journey. And you know, and I think as far as our kids go, we're trying to encourage that entrepreneurial mindset with them as well, and helping them to look outside the box and look for opportunities to add value to the world and serve and to create, because money is really just an indicator of, you know, of what people are willing to pay for something. It's like I've heard someone say a neutral measure of value or something like that. It's, if you make something that is adding value to the world to the degree that someone wants to pay you money for it, that's what how the exchange works. And the more value you can add to the world, the easier it will be, not easier, but the more likely it will be for you to be able to monetize that. And I mean, our oldest right now, she's 12, and she also, like everyone here, has a love for music, and she has been taking singing songwriting lessons online from a teacher through Skype. And she's just been writing songs for years and loves it, and just, it's a real passion for her. And she already has 3 songs up on iTunes for sale, and she's dabbling in writing books and creating art and doing all sorts of things that, I mean, I'm sure she'll be able to make money with that in some way, somehow, someday, and is already starting to. So, and she's just 12, so I'm confident that that's not going to be an issue for her.
And along with that, I just wanted to say one thing that I've really been feeling lately too, in my own journey. You know, it's so much, and it's been about this for a long time for me, even though I haven't been really acting on it. It's what really feels meaningful and purposeful to you, and what feels good, you know. And if you follow that, then it can't help but get you to a place that also feels good later. Like, if it feels good now, it will feel good later. If it doesn't feel good now, don't keep going on that path, because it won't be where you want to be later either, you know? So.
Well, to add to what you were saying about your daughter, I've been playing music since I was like 5 years old, and I've never once taken a lesson for anything in my entire life. And when I play music, as far as I can tell, I'm pretty good. And a question I get a lot is, well, how can you do something without lessons? Which is very similar to the question I get is, how do you do stuff without going to school? And you just kind of do it. If you're passionate about something, there is always an alternative way other than paying money to someone to teach you how to do it.
Philip, why don't you share with us how you did that? I mean, you learned sound engineering without going to school.
Yeah, I mean, it was more, my dad was a musician, so he'd always just kind of stick me at the soundboard. I don't even remember the first time I did sound. So it's something I always did because, my dad was a musician, and so I was just around it. I actually never even thought about doing it for a living. I just, a lot of times it was just helping out, and I liked helping out. So, I would do that, and then, he recorded, and there was, studios recording at, and I had a big interest in film and video, and I had already started my own lawn company when I was 12. So I had money, and I bought one of Sony's first, the format was Digital 8. That was not around very long, but I got a camera and I just started doing it. Then, like Martin said, I do it. People say, how did you do it? You didn't go to school for video? And you're like, and this is, you're talking, this is, 15, 16 years ago. And it was still like, yeah, well, I don't know. I just do it. Like, you're talking about a whole different mindset of just, that people are like, well, you have to get I need a title. It's that whole title thing before I can do something. Where when you're outside of that mindset, and again, being homeschooled, I already had money. I was already buying equipment. I was already, getting real life experience making films when I was an early teenager. And so just working, and then, I was running, had this camera and would go into the sessions and tape it. And the the engineer there was just like, oh, I want to start doing video here, and I don't even, I only have a camera just like you, so why don't you come and start helping me out some? And I did, and and turned into a job over time, over years. I started as an unpaid intern, then then he started paying me, and then by the time I left there, I was assistant to the lead engineer at that studio. So, but that was 3.5 years, and I went on to a bigger sound company, did that for 8 years, and then worked up to leaving that to run my own company. So it wasn't overnight. This wasn't one day I'm like, I'm going to start a recording studio, and then the next day it happened. It's not like that at all, I think. But people, they're thinking about education instead of just doing the hard work to pursue dreams and getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was similar for me in that with starting a business, I had no idea what I was doing when I started my business. I knew nothing about marketing. I knew nothing about graphics design, or I knew customer support because I was doing tech support. But in programming, I learned on my own as well. And it's funny, we talk about we're learning these things on our own. We're just doing it. And that's true. But I mean, at least in my case, I had a lot of resources available to me. I had the internet. I had books. I had people who I knew who were experienced in different things that I could bounce questions off of. And I think, sometimes having that experience outside of yourself can help jumpstart or shortcut a process of learning. So I would say that if universities, for example, are doing that effectively, they could be very useful, or like trade schools, for example. But sometimes it could, if it's like with our experience in college, where it was so spread out that we weren't getting the value out of it, then I think it's not as effective. Something else I was going to say there, but I can't remember. Do you have anything to add? Okay.
I just wanted to jump in. I think it's great listening to everybody talk about the different paths they took. I think that the traditional route, part of why that's so attractive to people and alluring, is it's like a map that's laid out before you of following certain steps to get to a specific goal. And I would love to tell you that I have a blueprint for what I did, and just follow these steps, and you can be a successful unschooling dad and engineer too, or Philip's steps of do these things, and you can do video and audio engineering. But the truth is, a lot of times it's a mix of following your interests, a little bit of luck, and capitalizing on opportunities that present themselves. And you don't necessarily know what's going to come of it. You don't know for sure where you're going. I didn't intend to set out and avoid college. In fact, when I dropped out of school, I was young. I was 17. And I met my wife when I was 18. and we've been together for 20 years. I'm 38 now. So I just started working, and I kind of thought when I started working, like, oh, I'll get a job. Maybe I can find something that pays okay part-time, and I'm going to try and go to school. I'll figure it out, get a GED. And you know, I tried that. I took a couple college classes, and I didn't like it. That's really the only way I can describe it. They weren't bad. It wasn't for me. That's all I can say. So I just kept working, and different opportunities presented themselves. And when he was born, I figured out that I was working in manufacturing at the time, and it was very much a 9 to 5, punch the clock, go into the factory, literally had to punch a time clock type of job. And I wasn't going to be able to support a family on that. And I knew that, and it was monetary, the first step I took into the career that I have now. I was just trying to find something that made a little more money. And in fact, the first job I got was much less money because I had to start from the bottom again. As I think Brandon mentioned, when you switch careers, sometimes you have to take a step back. But it wasn't a pre-planned thing. It's not like I sat when I don't think anybody at 18 years old or 17 or 16 or whenever you're faced with that choice really knows what they want to do. And even if you do, you don't know what circumstances are going to come up in your life that change the course that you're on. So it's kind of silly to try and micromanage it, plan it out. And even though it wasn't intentional, I hope that the stories that myself and the folks on this podcast are telling give a little bit of peace of mind that you can sort of maybe follow an unconventional path and not know if it's going to work out, and it'll probably work out.
Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Amazing. We're going to go and take a short break, and we're going to come back and continue the conversation. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about something that Philip talked about, which is internships and how that may be a viable path towards education and happiness. So we'll see you in just a few, actually 7 minutes after this break.
When I graduated from Princeton, tuition was less than $4,000 a year. Okay, there's been inflation since then, but now a year at Princeton costs more than $50,000. I don't even have any idea what they do with all the extra money. They stopped calling me to ask for donations because I always tell them, no way, I won't give you a cent. There are a million better causes than giving rich colleges more money. As one of my guests mentioned before, one reason tuition prices went up so much is because of handouts from government, mostly. When government increases financial aid, colleges spend more money. Even our free-spending president said he understood the problem.
Students and taxpayers can't just keep on subsidizing skyrocketing tuition. We're going to run out of money.
Right. Yet that same year, the president also said this.
My administration is increasing federal student aid so more students can afford college.
What? Doesn't he see the disconnect? I think he does, but he still panders for votes by giving your money away. Hey, it's not his money. And then his handouts increase tuition costs, so lots of students leave college deep in debt. It's another reason to wonder today, is college worth it? And that's the title of David Weilsall and Bill Bennett's book. So, David, I would think it's worth it for some people who really want to learn.
Yeah, exactly. For some people, it can be worth it. It depends on where you go, what you study, how much you borrow, and whether you have the academic persistence to really complete your program or not, is what we say in the book.
And lots of people don't have that. Most, I would say.
Many. I would say many. The graduation rates are pretty low. It's about 50% only graduate within 6 years. So if you consider that we have a whole bunch of taxpayers supporting people who never even finish, yeah, I think Americans have a right to be disappointed with a lot of the outcomes.
And the president wants to make community college free. That's 2 years, and yet something like 20% of the graduates graduate within 3 years. So a lot of them try. fall into debt, drop out, feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, that's right. I think this is a hallmark of a lot of liberal programs. You know, the intentions are right, but if you look at the numbers, the data behind it, it just doesn't really add up.
Another reason colleges now cost so much is that they've added luxuries. At the University of Missouri, I thought school officials might be embarrassed by how fancy their recreation center is, but no, they were proud.
The first thing you're struck by is our jungle lobby, banyan trees and all of the trappings of a jungle retreat. From there, you'll find yourself in the jungle gym, complete with the torches to welcome you into our cardio gallery, not to be outdone by Tiger Lair. Tiger Lair is our spinning studio, and it is outstanding.
Pretty much every parent that I have on my tour is pretty much like, I want to be back in school, or how do I get back to going to school? It's completely awesome.
Students will come to us and say, this is what sealed the deal. It used to be reading, writing, and arithmetic. And well, we're now the fourth R, recreation.
And we're paying for that?
Schools are kind of in an arms race with one another. They want to show off the most luxurious, nicest amenities so that the students beg their parents to come to the school, often, you know, bankrupting the parents and themselves in the process.
And the taxpayer, and it seems to work. High Point University in North Carolina have spent big bucks for an on-campus steakhouse, a train that takes you around campus, a putting green, outdoor hot tubs.
Yeah. They've been really successful in attracting a lot of students who can pay the full ticket price there. But if you look
enrollment's up 50%.
Yeah, but if you look at what are kids learning, what kind of jobs are they getting after they graduate, is High Point that distinguished from many other schools? I don't think so.
The one that just looking at it looks most remarkable is Texas Tech. They spent more than $8 million on a water park, the Lazy River water slide. Well, you're looking at it here.
Yeah. Colleges have actually, in a lot of ways, just become one big lazy river overall. We're witnessing the decline of a lot of academic work. You know, in 1961, students spent a combined 40 hours a week in school and out of school studying. We're down to 27 hours a week now these days. It's being replaced by a lot of just leisure pursuits.
And a lot of the academic work seems to be really minute stuff nobody reads that they publish.
That's right. That's right. I mean, William Shakespeare's had 21,000 scholarly articles published on himself in the last 30 years or so. How many people are reading things like that? It's highly specialized, highly idiosyncratic things like courses on UFOs in a lot of places, vampires, pornography, so on and so forth.
Yeah, Skidmore has the sociology of Miley Cyrus, Rutgers, politicizing Beyonce.
Beyonce, Jay-Z, all these fascinating character studies, but I think personally we should get back to Homer, Shakespeare, Dickens, all these people.
Though I would argue I'm not so sure that anybody knows that's what every student must learn. Another reason I wonder about the value of colleges is that students are now allowed to specialize in these obscure or useless things. This movie, mocking modern thesis topics, is a comedy, but an increasingly accurate one.
Big Man is trying to prove the Caine-Hackman theory. No matter what time it is, 24 hours a day, you can find a Michael Caine or a Gene Hackman movie playing on TV.
But that's his thesis?
Yes. That's the beauty of college these days, Tommy. You can major in Game Boy if you know how to bull.
Can you really?
Yeah, you really can. There's a lot of students not learning very much, and even look at American businesses, what they say about the quality of the graduates they're taking in, trying to recruit. It's just not there.
In art, and I was pursuing my path as an artist, and I don't know what difference art gave, the degree in art, fine art gave me, but I do know that at 20 I was a highly employed waitress. And so I waited on tables for many, many years, and it was the early 90s. I was waiting on tables next door to this brand new startup, and they were doing this strange thing called making websites for this strange thing called the internet. And it was early 90s, and I had no idea what these things were. I didn't even know how to turn a computer on. This is when I graduated college. So I was interested and would always wait on the designers and the creatives that worked at this startup. And so one day I talked myself into being invited over next door to see this startup. And they showed me a tour of the offices, and it was really cool, hip, and creative. And I talked my way into an internship, actually, and I became this company's first non-paid intern, and I learned how to turn a computer on. Because I had an art background, I started to understand the fundamentals of design, and I sat in the basement and next to the designers that had, some sort of background in design and were employed as a web designer. I learned from a British guy HTML, and this became part of my introduction into what soon became my career. So early 90s, 91, 92, I then was hired at this firm, and I worked for this company for maybe 6 years. I went from unpaid intern to junior designer to senior designer. Finally, I became an art director, and then I was recruited by another company as a creative director. And then finally, years later, I worked for ad agencies and became a consultant, was very highly in demand, and then started my own agency. So that wasn't my path, but it became, it wasn't what my intended path was. There was some relationship to it, and I had a beautiful 18-year career as a creative director of creative advertising, branding, and marketing, based on waiting on tables and having that interest and passion, and having the ability to say, hey, I want to learn more, and doing the work to now work. When I first started, it was 2 jobs. It was unpaid intern and a waitress. And that changed the course of my life. I think that internships can be valuable. And we heard from Philip and how he talked his way into, becoming a sound designer, and then moving through and eventually owning his own company too. I'd love to hear other people's experiences interning, and how they feel that served as some value or as an alternative to university or college.
Okay, for a little while, I was on a path to become a medical assistant. It was one of the things I was just exploring interests, and so I thought, oh, there's this program, I can try it out as part of the high school that I was attending. There was this program you could go and learn a specialized thing. So I was like, oh, medical intern, like medical assistant, sounds interesting. And so I went through that whole program, and I did, get the chance to go to an actual office and just kind of do, I can't remember if it was called an internship or an externship, but it was really interesting to be able to work in an actual office, like seeing what it would be like to have that job. And, from that experience, I pretty much discovered that's not what I wanted to do, for a long-term thing. But it was really helpful for me to have that experience, to learn the actual skill set and what it would be like to work in that type of environment. And so it just kind of helped me learn more than I would have otherwise, but also discover that's not something I want to do long term, and then frees me up to explore other interests.
And you didn't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to do
No, and I didn't. No. Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't do an internship myself, but I did do a very low paying, like minimum wage call center job was my first job in my current career. So it was like an internship in the sense that, you're at the bottom of the barrel. And in fact, the company I work for today probably pays the summer interns that we hire more than I got paid in a call center job. But I think the concept is there in that you're there to learn. more so than to collect a check at that point. And that's actually what I did. So the company I worked for, it was a Dutch company, and they had a huge call center in Boston, Massachusetts. And I worked there for almost 2 years. And probably 3 months after I got hired there, they said, do you want to work on the night shift? They needed a night shift operator. So I agreed to that. I said, yeah, sure, that works for me. It actually was great because I live in New Hampshire and the commuting would be better. So I did the night shift. And the thing about the night shift is we were supporting customers on the East Coast to the West Coast, but only in the US. So after the people on the West Coast went to bed, we didn't get any calls. But the company that I worked for had an internal online university that you could take tech classes in your spare time in between taking phone calls. And we get no phone calls for 5 or 6 hours a night. So, I'd have coworkers on either side of me. One is building a computer for himself to take home on one side of me. The other one's playing Game Boy for 5 hours straight. And I was taking the online university courses, and I was able to talk my way into a better job based on not a lot of hands-on experience from that job, but based mainly on the technical certifications that I earned by taking the classes in my downtime at that job. So it was a great experience in that, I was probably doing 3 hours worth of work and then 5 hours of just hitting the books.
That's really cool. I love that story. So I'm going to ask this panel, if you were to suggest to somebody who is considering an internship, how would they go out and find an internship? I'm not going to recommend everybody they wait on tables and wait for the next big thing to open up next door. So what would be your suggestions?
I mean, I feel like, any connection with another human being can be an internship. You can just surround yourself with people that have the same interest as you. I still have many audio, video, photography mentors, and I spend as much time with them as I can because I learn so much, and that's, you find people that are 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ahead of you in your interests, and they've already been there. They're where you're at, and they're like, I remember my first time I got my first camera, and this is the thing I didn't know how to do on it. Or, I remember the first time I recorded a band, and here's some things to watch out for. And that's, internships are everywhere with, and it just surround yourself with people that love the things you love.
And I think, here in Victoria, there's a place called the Maker's Space. I think there's a lot of these popping up in different places, but I went and did a tour of it the other day, and what a cool place. I mean, they've got 3D printers, and they've got CNC cutting machines, and they've got a recording studio and all sorts of computer equipment and everything to be able to make or build whatever you want. And the people that are members of this group, they're engineers, and they're programmers, and they're people who are woodworkers, people who in their spare time just like to create things, or even business owners who are looking to create new products. And you can pay $50 a month or something to be a member of this space and work with these people in different ways and learn from them. And everyone's so supportive of each other and helping each other learn. And I think opportunities like that are a fantastic way to learn, and very inexpensive as well. I remember also, years ago I was in a group called Toastmasters, which is for learning to do public speaking. And I mean, it was so helpful to be able to practice that and to have, people there to, encourage me and critique me. And I think looking for opportunities like that can be similar to an internship. I've never been an intern or hired an intern or brought on an intern, but I think the opportunities for learning are all around us.
And I think along with that, the internet makes it so easy to find people who are willing to share with you their knowledge, and just people who you might admire online who are into the same thing that you're interested in learning more about. It's so easy to just send an email and ask a question and be like, I love what you're doing, I have some questions for you, and they're so often so willing to answer and even just really be a huge support if you want that even. So, yeah.
I don't know about other people my age, but I know for me personally, I've always had a really hard time with letting people teach me things I don't know. I'm just like I obviously I know I don't know everything because no one does, but I've always had a really hard time with accepting help with that kind of thing. And I know how necessary it is, but I've never been able to bring myself to accept help and that kind of thing. Like if I'm working on something on drums and someone says, maybe you should do it this way, that might be easier, I'll be like, oh, thanks, but like I'll feel like, well, I wanted to learn that myself, and I didn't get a chance to, and like I've just always had a really big like problem with that.
I think you're touching on something called learning styles, and I think that's important to acknowledge as well. Some people like to be shown stuff. Some people need to hear instructions. Some people like to read it, and other people just like to figure it out themselves. So I think that's something we haven't actually talked about. And I think also in terms of learning styles, it tends to be a lot more important as you're growing up versus when you get into college, university age, because I think at college, university age, I think we've unfortunately have on some levels trained ourselves to go, kind of to work within the flow, go within the norm. And I think for you, understanding what your learning style is, and those that are home educated, understanding discernment as to what they want and what they don't want, that's important. Finding your voice is also very, very important. So kudos to all the home educated kids, that are coming, into an age of being ready for higher education. Very, very cool. Anybody else have anything they wanted to add along those lines?
So I just want to say a little bit more. I love that he knows that about himself, because I think he gets that. I mean, I hear myself when I hear him talking about, like, I just got to figure it out myself, and I'm very much the same way. But I didn't really know that about or understand that about myself when I was his age, and I thought there was just like something wrong with me, really. That like, oh, I'm just not comfortable, asking other people for help, or I've got to figure things out on my own. And I think it's powerful to know yourself well enough to have that knowledge, like, hey, this is where I'm most comfortable. It doesn't necessarily have to be, because there are some people who are just very gregarious and outgoing. And my wife has a cousin who's a truck driver. He delivers for a package delivery company. I won't say the name, but he had a guy on his route that was a guitar teacher, and he would just chat the guy up every time he would drop packages off at his house. And eventually he started actually taking guitar lessons. He'd come by, drop off a package, and he'd get a little bit guitar lesson. And then after a while, he got invited to this guy's like garage blues band that he had. So he's playing rhythm guitar and singing in this blues band. And we'd hear the stories, like every time we'd see my wife's cousin at a family party, he'd say, oh yeah, I just learned how to play this song. He'd have a guitar, and he'd show us the song. And the next time we'd see him, he's like, yeah, I've been singing blues in this guy's garage. And then the last time we saw him, I was like, yeah, we just played out our first show. So I mean, this guy's in his 50s. He's a truck driver. He's not quitting his day job, but that's how he came down that path. It was just by, chatting a guy up and being friendly and wanting to, not that it's not friendly to want to do it yourself, but everybody has a different way of learning, and knowing that is really powerful.
See, I envy that, because I've always wanted to be the kind of person that can just be like, hey, I don't have any idea of how I'm supposed to do this, and you look like it's second nature to you, so could you please teach me how to do this? I can't say that, like, because I don't know why. It's just, for me, I don't know why.
And I agree. Knowing that about yourself is really, really, powerful. And I think also the thing about self-directed learners is we have permission to change our minds too. We can change our minds about focus. We can change our minds about how we want to learn. And we can do that at any point and any time. I wanted to share with you guys a story. So through my path, right? I have a whole new career now, my path. Through travel, I discovered that I have this absolute incredible love for learning again. And I rediscovered that, and travel is the gift that gave me that. And not only do I love learning about learning, which is why I'm hosting this show and creating this catalog of information for anybody else who might have the same interest, I also have interests that I didn't know that I had. For example, I never knew that archaeology would be a passion of mine. I had no interest in it before I started traveling 8 years ago, but now I'm absolutely crazy about it. And I've pursued all of these alternative archaeologists and researchers in a way that, I keep gathering more information, and I go to the sites and I study history and I ask for the oral histories, and I'm putting together a picture in my mind that makes sense to me or that interests me, and nobody's telling me to do this, but I just want more knowledge. And so about 4 years ago, Miro and I were here in Peru, and there was this pretty famous alternative researcher who was the next city down, and so I sent him an email, and I just simply asked him, can I come? Can I come and talk to you and listen and who knows what? And so we sat with him for a day, and I learned all about these elongated skulls and the history of the cranial deformations and the trepidations and all these different things that you don't find in the books, because not only now did I learn what the alternative researcher was researching, but I learned how it differs from the traditional history. And then I learned the oral history. And then it was so fascinating to me. A year later, I came back to the museum where he was curating, and Miro and I sat with him for 3 days, and we photographed each of these skulls. So we took the skulls out of the cases, and we created this Lazy Susan, and we photographed them in 360 degrees, and we looked at them and we photographed them in such a way. I mean, this because degree in archaeology, but because I'm interested. And the other thing was because I asked. So I think as self-directed learners, long story short, it's just about having the power to ask and redefining what education looks like to each one of us. That's just a story I wanted to share. Anybody else have any anecdotes or stories they'd like to share from their lives? The floor is yours.
Well, it's funny you talk about, I feel like, just from an education and progressing as a society, standpoint, it's crazy. I was telling a friend about unschooling, who we were playing some music together, and he was a newer friend, and I was telling him about it, and he was like, what a cool social experiment. Like, what he's like, just like, why isn't this, why aren't more people doing this? Just from a fact is, we don't know how it turns out for people, and we need to see more people doing this just from a standpoint, because we could learn as education as a whole, and so I mean, that's kind of like a new topic of it, but it's an interesting thought that someone I just told about unschooling right away was like, why aren't we doing this just to learn about it and see how people turn out this way? Because what if it's better than what we've been doing before?
Well, people are. And there are some incredible studies on it. I just, it's a perfect point to mention Dr. Peter Gray, who has been a guest on our show in the past. He did a study on grown unschoolers, And it was a pretty comprehensive study published in Psychology Today. So if anybody watching this is interested, please just Google that. And I think it's a 2 or 3 entry article published, like I said, in Psychology Today that talks about the results. And it's also, actually, it was Dr. Peter Gray and Dr. Gina Riley, who also has been on our show before, who co-authored that study. But you're right, it is a good social experiment, not only for society as a whole, but for the ability to redefine what learning and education looks like. And I think that the beautiful thing about this show's topic is we're not talking about redefining education, we're talking about redefining and owning happiness and how those two things relate to one another. Anyway, I would love for anybody else to jump in.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. Yeah, I think it's interesting, the question of why aren't more people doing it? And to your point, Lainie, there are lots of people doing it. But I think one of the reasons is the traditional model for education is self-reinforcing. It's a closed loop in the sense of if you are in, and this isn't just college, but public school or any traditional school setting, the idea of thinking about paths outside of it are sort of it's against that model. So you're not going to find much of it. It's like, you don't go to McDonald's and see Burger King advertisements because they're trying to sell you McDonald's burgers. And I think the same thing happens in the school system. They're not a commercial enterprise, at least not the public schools, but they're still trying to sell you something because it's in the best interest of that particular institution to keep people in that path. So you're not going to see a lot of encouragement of thinking outside of those lines from within that. You really have to be willing to look outside of the traditional path. And I think as more people do it, there will be at one point a critical mass where it will be viable enough or seen as viable enough. It's like, what are these guys doing over here? What are these kids that are out playing in the yard at 11 o'clock in the morning or, whatever the case may be. And wow, it looks like they're having a lot of fun. Martin mentioned he has some friends that are public school, and some of them are skeptical about what we're doing, but I think other ones kind of like admire it. They kind of look like, wow, I wish we could do that. But it's tough to make that mental leap.
Yeah, I think it's interesting in the public education system or education in general. I think in our culture, a few weeks ago, my 10-year-old daughter was speaking to a friend who is public school, and she just couldn't wrap her head around how our daughter could learn math without going to school and without having a teacher. And she was just, how did you learn it? How do you learn it? And it was interesting to hear my daughter explain to her, well, I look online, I don't know, I just figure it out, I do it. And, it's interesting because, she really loves math, actually. She spends a lot of time on math sites practicing different skills or making worksheets for herself to answer problems that she comes up with to help her be able to answer questions that are more relevant to her in life as well. And I just think that kind of thinking that it's possible to learn something outside of the system is, like Kevin was saying, just not reinforced. It's not taught. It's not supported. But yeah, just to reiterate that, I think as more people do that, and as it becomes more and more common, it'll be easier for more people to see that works.
And I want to say too, we had no idea how it would work for our daughters, for us, for our family when we started. We just kind of were trusting that what felt good would turn out good. So we started out homeschooling, like school at home, and we quickly learned that didn't feel good for us. And So we just kind of took a break and we're like, okay, well, what feels good? And, you know, you find your own path little by little, and your path looks nothing like anybody else's path. But I think so much of it is just putting trust in you will find your path and it will work out, you know, and like, yeah, with world schooling, you know, traveling around, like I know I've heard you, Lainie, say that it's just such a catalyst for learning, traveling. And it has been like, I mean, Brandon and I don't even want to think about what we would be like in comparison if we had never traveled, because it's just changed us immensely in so many ways that we feel are very positive. So yeah, I think it's just trusting in your path. Yeah.
So I kind of have a question on behalf of a friend of mine. So I have a friend who's very bright and understands that for what he might want might not be the greatest idea to go to college for. But his family is very, you must go to college. And I was wondering if anyone has any advice for him on how he should address the situation about how he doesn't really want to go to college.
Well, I think, you know, you have to decide at some point, which is the struggle that I had to go through, is what other people think is going to make you happy. Is that what's going to make you happy, or what your intuition, you know, is the, you know, following your intuition, is that going to make you happy? And we're, you know, talking about, you know, happiness without higher education, you know, isn't that the point? It's not necessarily that, you know, you don't need a degree to be happy. Isn't that the point? You know, because happiness comes from following your dreams, you know. And I think the older you get, you know, just turning 30, I'm really learning that, you know, that career sometimes doesn't mean like, you know, I love music and I love drums, but I don't play drums every day, but I enjoy the things I do to get by and make money. And it does make me happy because I found things that I can get paid to do that I enjoy. And, you know, you don't know what that's going to be. And, you know, no one's really talked about fear. Don't a lot of people go to college because of fear? You know, it seems like that's a huge thing right now, because all that pressure, social pressure, the commercials, you don't want to be unhappy. And, you know, because everyone that goes to college makes more money, and money's happiness. And that's not necessarily true, but it's all forced on so many people. And it's really sad. And then you have people like, you know, I'm not being a parent. You have people, you know, like Brandon and Kevin that are, you know, really, you know, you guys are doing this because I think you're just really ahead of your time. And you know, Lainie too, especially, you know, with your, you know, the world schooling. I think that's like, what's the best way to learn about New York City? You know, probably go there. You know, but no, you don't see that commercial, do you?
Yeah, powerful. And I'm actually really surprised that we didn't talk about fear up until this point. I mean, fear is a huge motivator, especially coming from somebody who used to work in creating, I hate to say it, fear-based messaging through advertising and marketing, because that's how you manipulate and control the masses, which is why I don't do it anymore. I just want to be clear about that. But clearly, fear is one of those motivators. And I believe if we change our beliefs about what education is and what college promises, and find alternative routes and make that the common baseline belief in society. Unfortunately, colleges and universities that are not specialty universities and colleges will no longer be in business. They're not really needed. Yes, you'll need technology colleges. Yes, you'll need, maybe not technology as in computer science, but you'll need like engineering, you know, that sort of thing. And some of the sciences you need still probably will still be structured in the lab, you know, neuroscience, you know, obviously you're not going to do neuroscience in your own living room, you know, or medical or law. So yes, you will need colleges that specialize in certain things, but what do you need a liberal arts degree for? I don't see that as part of our new future. And I think maybe fear is keeping people from changing their thoughts. The world is changing. We can see it changing. The world I grew up in is not the world that, Philip grew up in, or that Martin is growing up in. I mean, it's unheard of not, graduating college and not knowing how to turn on a computer. That's unheard of today, So yeah, the world is changing. I think it's parents like us and kids like you guys that are on the cutting edge of these changes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're at an inflection point with technology being able to bring so much knowledge and experience to anybody who has internet access. So you have this whole world of potential, but at the same time, there haven't been a lot of people who have done it just based on, finding the information or knowledge themselves. So you can kind of you see a little bit over the edge of the cliff, but you don't see all the way over, so you're afraid to jump. And I think the fear thing is also, you're managing your own fear where that's concerned, but you're also managing the fears and expectations of your family members and your loved ones. Like, Martin was mentioning his friend. There's family expectations there, and I would guess, I'm not inside this person's head, but I would guess that some of his fear and uncertainty stems from not wanting to let mom and dad down. If their expectation is, you have to go to college, we went to college, or maybe the story is we didn't go to college, we want better for our kids, and that's a common theme. That's tough. And I think one of the things, this is just a practical strategy that I would suggest if somebody was just saying, hey, what would you do if you were this kid? I think that this should be something everybody does, is at a minimum, just negotiate with your parents, take a gap year. Just don't, graduate, do whatever you have to do for the high school thing, and then take a year off to figure out what the heck you want to do next. Don't go right into college. Don't start incurring that debt right away, because you're probably not at a place where you can make the decision that has the financial impact that it has and weight that it has. Just take the time. And if it's really true that you don't want to go to college, the gap year might be all that's needed to get your family or your parents or loved ones comfortable with the fact that you can be self-sufficient and you can do something productive, find employment, find something you're passionate about, and be successful and happy. Or say, hey, I need another year. if maybe 1 year doesn't do it, take 2 years. But I think that's something that's becoming sort of accepted. And you could, just from pure practicality, you could say, hey, mom, dad, college is really expensive. I really don't know what I want to do yet. I know you want me to go, but I'm just going to find a job and learn a skill and work on that for a year or so and see what I can do. Oh.
Well, to add on to that, I think the problem a lot of times nowadays is that kids don't really know how to address their parents on that kind of level anymore. I think there, for a lot of times in an average family, there's a disconnect between the parent and the child about whether or not the child feels comfortable about saying, hey, I don't really think college is right for me. I think it's not as much fear as I'm not really comfortable asking that kind of question. And I could never imagine, because I'm completely comfortable talking to all adults. But I know that that's not really the case for a lot of children my age.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And we're really talking about a systemic problem, right? It's a cultural problem. And I think, those of us that are on the outer edge of thinking differently about education and having different conversations, we're the ones that are going to make a huge difference. We're going to keep modeling that it does work. We're going to keep modeling that there are ways to speak to one another respectfully and in partnership. And I see Kevin and Martin. I see you too, with speaking with respect and in true partnership. And Philip, I heard that when you talked about, working with your dad. That's really cool. And I know Brandon and Jen, you two also model that kind of partnership with their children. I know this is going into a much deeper issue. I mean, we're talking about respect and we're talking about parenting. That's how I parent too. I guess all we can do is just continue doing what we're doing and model that it works, and keep getting shows out like this that show that there are other ways of approaching the world, that the world is shifting, the world is changing, and we can be a part of that change. Any thoughts, Brandon and Jennifer? I mean, as parents, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's funny bringing up the message of respect, because so often I think that's expected to be directed from the kids to the parents, when I think respect is something that should be given all the way around, because we're all human beings in a family, and we all deserve that respect and that love.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, Brandon and I, so in our path, we made a lot of decisions that were against what our family and friends back home wanted for us. Many, many decisions. And we didn't grow up that way. We grew up really towing the line. And so when we started making these crazy decisions, in their eyes crazy, they were shocked. And a lot of people were very angry at us. And it's interesting because we were really excited. And so I think part of what we would have done differently is we would have been able to see, okay, so just because we're excited doesn't mean we can expect everybody else to be excited for us, because they're on a completely different path and mindset, and that's okay. But I think for sure what I would have done differently is to be more compassionate towards them, and really try to communicate more with them and include them and make them feel like they were more a part of our lives, instead of just being so excited about this different path and just kind of flying off on that. And I think they kind of felt a little emotionally abandoned and deserted, which I also felt that way too, because they weren't like excited for us, but I can totally see both sides of it, and I think having compassion for ourselves when we're disappointed in somebody's reaction, but also having compassion for them and learning to kind of give ourselves what we're kind of looking at from those people, like what we're looking for from those people that we love that we're not getting, but learning to give that to ourselves, and also to kind of cooperate with them and just be like, what would really mean a lot to you for me to do that would also be respecting myself at the same time, so we can kind of give and take a little bit.
And I think that's a lot to expect from a young child if it hasn't been modeled to them.
Yeah.
Throughout their childhood. So I think it puts a lot of responsibility, I think, on the parents in order to help the kids feel comfortable in living their dreams and in choosing whatever path they feel good about, because it takes a lot of courage. Otherwise, it'd be a pretty tenacious kid to stand up to a parent who, and I mean, that's where rebellion comes from, though, isn't it? The parents who say, you do this or else, and then the kid says, oh yeah, and goes their own way. And that's the other way that it often happens.
Or they don't rebel, and they just hold it all in, and that causes other problems. I mean, that's kind of how I was until I wasn't, but it's kind of a crash course,
I've had a lot of friends of mine, well, maybe not a lot, but a good amount of people that I know really resent me for being homeschooled. Like, you're different, how dare you, basically. Like, I think it comes off as different than how they want it to come off, because I think they're jealous, like, because they're always like, well, like, you don't have any friends, and I'm better than you. It's very like, it's a very awkward conversation that I try and avoid as much as possible, but it comes up a lot more than it really, I think, needs to.
No, I remember being young and lying about being homeschooled because kids in my neighborhood would be like, what school do you go to? And I'm like, but I never liked lying, because that's just it, we all know that it's just a path that doesn't end. So it's like, but there was this inner battle at times of like, do I say the local high school? Because then they're going to be like, well, I go there, I don't see you. But then it was, it's tough to have, like Martin's talking about, that conversation, because some people can't handle it, which I think does tie in, to fear, just like anyone can run into that when you can't accept someone where they're at. That's really an insecurity with yourself. And, it's definitely a struggle, I feel like, and how you deal with that, that was something that, I struggled with, like Martin's talking about, which just, how do you handle that? And you kind of avoid it. But if they really want to talk about it, you have to say, and at some point you have to be like, well, this is me and this is what we're trying. And we're not living in, worrying about, how it's going to turn out, because we're not worried about that. But people can't handle that. Like, well, a lot of people, I don't want to say people, people can handle that. That's why we're all here, is because we can. But the masses are having a hard time getting there. But it is changing. You guys are all examples of that.
Yeah, that fear of how others will react. I mean, I've experienced that as a parent as well. I mean, we weren't always unschoolers. We traveled a path just like Jennifer and Brandon mentioned with their kids, where we started very much school at home and structured. And, I can remember, it was my wife's idea originally to homeschool. And I went along with it. I won't say I embraced it, but I went along with it. And she bought me this book by John Holt called Teach Your Own. And I read that book and I said, wow, that's, this guy is like well thought. He knows what he's talking about. This isn't a kooky or crazy idea. And I sort of got a little more comfortable with it, but I would still get questions from colleagues and coworkers because, my wife is home with the kids for the most part. And at the time I was out of the house, 5 days a week, 8, 9, 10 hours a day. And I would be asked by coworkers, oh, where do your kids go to school? And I never lied about it, but I was tempted a couple times, like, oh, I just don't want to answer all the questions that are going to come when I say we homeschool. And then, it's just like it's almost instinctual. Like that urge to just say, oh, yeah, my kids go to the local school, like, and just not even acknowledge what you're doing. And I've come a long way since then, and now I embrace it, and I'll volunteer the information and work meetings and stuff where nobody's even asking about it. It's like, oh yeah, I homeschool my kids, and we did this, this weekend, or whatever the case may be. So it's a journey, and the fear comes from a place of wanting to protect yourself and protect your family. And going back to like how parents wanting their kids to go to college, even homeschooling families that we know that really want their kids to go to college, just like they're not trying to be dictatorial or hard on their kids or have unreasonable expectations. There's a fear that you only really truly know as a parent of, what if they don't make it? What if they don't succeed? What if, they fly out of the nest and they hit the ground? Like, you don't want that to happen. You want to set the conditions up as best as you can for success. So that's where that comes from. So I have a lot of empathy for that. And it's good to keep that in mind as well.
And what you were saying about the path we've taken, maybe someday we'll end up traveling the world too. Think about it.
Well, I already work from home half the week, so if I can make it the full week, we can go anywhere we want.
Awesome. I think we've got some world schoolers in training here. I think this has been an incredible conversation. And I think if there's one thing that we did discover is, number one, it's not easy to go against the grain and not at least address some of the fear that comes up about this. But from the beginning of the show, we talked about passion and passion being a part of happiness, and happiness really being the true key, the thing that we want to instill upon our children, other than, happiness. What else is there? So I've learned so much from this conversation, and I think it's been incredible. I would like to go around to each of our panelists and give you the opportunity to share any closing thoughts. And please do share any projects or websites or anything that you're working on that you'd like to share with our audience now. And I do want to remind anybody who's watching this that you can find more information at the show notes page for the links at consciousconsumernetwork.tv or for the loveoflearningshow.com. And look for the show notes page for episode number 66. So why don't we start off with Philip, closing thoughts, and share your projects and websites.
Okay, well, first I'd like to say thanks for, having me be a part of this. I mean, what a cool group of people, and to even, be considered part of this, because, not having kids and, being homeschooled in a very we had school books and there was a lot of structure, so it wasn't really unschooled, so, being welcomed into this circle just because I'm very curious about it and wanted to support it, because I'm like, this is, something to support, because I found, after being homeschooled, that this is how I was learning, was just by doing and learning myself. And I'm, and finding John Holt's writings is how I actually found out about it. And just, with the internet evolving and starting to meet people that were doing this, and I just, it's really cool to be part of this community and to keep learning from all of you. And my company right now is the Leaning House Studio and Productions, and we're on Facebook. I got a website that's being worked on now, but it's not quite done yet. So if anyone's interested in any of that, you can check it out on Facebook. And again, thanks for having me.
All right, so closing thoughts. Yeah, so I agree with Philip. It's great to be on here with all of you. It's always feels really good to come together in a community, and because we are, different than the norm, so it feels good to share thoughts together and talk about some of these important things to us, and I think to a lot of people. And I'll let Brandon share our new project. It's a lot about community as well, that we've been trying to make more of for ourselves, as for with our traveling lifestyle situation.
Sure, yeah, we're hosting an event next year called the Family Adventure Summit for traveling families and those who aspire to travel with their families, either long-term, indefinitely, or even for a shorter term. But we'll have talks about education and travel and entrepreneurship and all sorts of topics that would be of interest and help to those. One of the other things I've been doing lately is coaching, which I don't think I mentioned yet on this call, but it's been really rewarding for me to work with people who are at a crossroads in life where they're feeling blocked. They see a vision of what they want, but they're not sure either how to get there or if they can get there. And the lifestyle that all of us are living, the choices we're making, I think are possible for just about anyone in these situations. But there can be such a block that we place on ourselves, or that's been placed by our culture, and it's just rewarding for me to see those blocks removed and to see people jump into a life that is more fulfilling and rewarding for them. You can also find us. We write on our family travel blog called pearceonearth.com, Pearce onearth.com, about our travels and about everything that we're doing. So check us out there. And then if you're a music teacher and you want to go to my business, it's musicteachershelper.com. software to help private music teachers keep track of the billing and scheduling and business side of teaching.
Okay, I don't have any big projects to plug. We do have a family blog. It's called Growing Sideways. The URL is harvey-olson, olson.net. It's mostly my wife blogging. She's the better blogger than I am, but we capture our thoughts on unschooling life there. And I'll plug the way that I know most of you guys, which is through homeschooling and unschooling conferences. There's a great conference happening this September called Life Without Instructions. It's going to be happening just outside of New York City, so I'll throw a plug in there, and I'm going to throw it over to Martin because he wants to plug his pages.
So thank you for having me on the show. I'm thrilled to be on a podcast. And for my stuff, I got a band called Hangman's Job. We're on Facebook. Look us up. We're like metal-ish punk folk stuff. So yeah, thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to all of our panelists. And thank you to Mel and Biggie over at Conscious Consumer Network. Again, as always, we're so incredibly grateful to be on this network and to have these conversations and to archive them. And thank you to Anne. This is her second show that she has produced and actually is the creator of Life Without Instructions Conference, who is also our part-time producer helping out myself and Nina. Producing this show. It takes a village. We all are putting in our efforts and energies to create this archive because it's important to put something out into the world. And for those that want to pursue alternative education as a passion, we now have created materials for you. So finally, I just want to say, wherever you are and whatever you do, continue to always do it for the love of learning.
Conscious Consumer Network was designed to create a live broadcast TV network for free and independent media and has been live on the air since the 1st of January 2015. CCN gets millions of minutes watched every month and is viewed in over 140 countries, having produced around 1,400 shows and counting.
And you know, it's very hard to get on the mainstream media, of course, the corporate media that's getting tighter and more monopolized and more restrictive for any outside information.
The live broadcasts are free to view and all shows are archived in high definition on YouTube. CCN plays host to a stellar team of broadcasters and producers, all of whom rely on the network to get their message and information out to the world. CCN has continued to evolve, constantly seeking to create greater media usage and opportunities for both broadcasters and viewers, including supporting projects such as the newly launched consciouscommunities.org, a brand new social media platform that is free to use and has been created for those dedicated to the pursuit of freedom, justice, peace, and sustainability to come together and co-create the solutions to a better world. Due to the constant heavy usage, we are in need of replenishing and replacing of key hardware and infrastructural wear and tear. This includes the fixing and replacing of parts of the live broadcast equipment system, as well as increasing storage capacities for content and projects. Without this, CCN and its affiliate projects will simply not be able to continue. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded project, and it is up to you all to keep CCN on the air. Support our funding drive with a donation or become a monthly pledger. We thank you all for supporting free and independent media.